Now that's bold. Are you the one in charge here? On a crowded Friday night, twin sisters Naomi and Nadine Harris found themselves surrounded, not by strangers, but by three off-duty cops who had been drinking far too much and flexing power they didn't deserve. Mocked for their appearance, treated like outsiders, and manhandled in front of a silent crowd, the sisters were paraded as easy prey. Women to humiliate, victims with no power to fight back. But the officers didn't know who they were cuffing. Before this night, the Harris sisters had walked through fire, survived years of brutal battles forged by their careers as FBI agents. The men who thought they were breaking two women were, in truth, lighting the fuse to their own downfall. Hey, before we jump into the story, did you know 99% of you watching aren't subscribed? Let's change that. Hit subscribe and join the family. The usual bar chatter dimmed as Naomi Harris locked eyes with Sergeant Roy Mercer, his badge still clipped to his belt, his whiskey breath thick. "I said back off," Naomi repeated, her voice steady, her spine straightening against his looming shadow. Roy only smirked wider. His fellow officers, Brent Harlow and Shane Porter, flanked the sisters like circling predators. One placed heavy hands on Nadine's chair, the other swayed unsteadily, making crude remarks that made the room colder with every word. No one else spoke. No one else moved. The entire bar felt like a stage, and Naomi and Nadine were caught under the spotlight. But the show wasn't going to end the way Roy Mercer thought. Smash like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. It's quick and free. The bass from the jukebox faded into the background as the tension thickened. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped, and still nobody dared to interfere. The Friday night crowd had gone silent, every eye fixed on the Harris sisters as they faced down three armed men drunk on whiskey and authority. Naomi's dark gaze never left Sergeant Roy Mercer's bloodshot eyes. The badge clipped to his belt glinted beneath the overhead light, a cruel reminder of how much power he wielded even off-duty. "I said back off," Naomi repeated firmly, her voice low but unwavering. Roy leaned in closer, his massive frame swallowing the space between them. The stink of alcohol rolled off him. His lips curled into a mocking grin. "Or what, sweetheart? You gonna make me?" Behind him, Officer Brent Harlow rested his meaty hands on Nadine's shoulders. His grip tightened to remind her who he thought was in charge. Officer Shane Porter swayed unsteadily near the table, laughing at his crude joke. "Look at those curves," he slurred. "Double the chocolate. Am I right, Sarge?" Several patrons shifted in their seats. One woman slipped out quickly, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The air inside the bar felt thick, oppressive, like everyone was breathing the same heavy breath. Nadine Harris held her glass steady, refusing to let her rage show. Her sisters. Warning had already been given, but Brent's fingers dug deeper into her shoulders. "Don't touch me," Nadine said flatly, each word as sharp and deliberate. "Oh yeah?" Brent squeezed harder. "Or what? You gonna call the cops on us?" The three men burst into laughter, their voices loud and ugly. The sound rolled through, the bar like thunder, covering the whispered prayers of those who wished they were elsewhere. Behind the counter, Javier Ortiz froze mid-motion, his rag still repeatedly wiping the same spot on the bar. His jaw was clenched tight, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Not when Mercer already had him in his sights. "Gentlemen," Javier said, stepping closer with a tray of empty glasses. "Maybe you should—" "Shut it, Ortiz," Roy snapped without looking. "Go back to washing dishes before I decide to check your papers again." Javier's face burned red, but he stepped back, his tray trembling. He knew the threat wasn't empty. He also knew this night was spiraling into something darker. "Last chance," Naomi said again, eyes locked on Mercer. "Walk away before this gets worse." Roy dragged a chair across the floor with a screech that made half the bar wince. He straddled it backwards, leaning in so close that Naomi could smell the stale bourbon on his breath. "That's cute. You think you're in charge here?" He looked over his shoulder, smirking at Brent and Shane. Ladies seem to have forgotten whose town this is. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke. Nobody stopped him. Shane chuckled and leaned low, his lips nearly brushing Nadine's ear. "Come on, baby girl. Smile for me. You're dressed for it." Nadine's hands tightened on the glass. She wanted to slam it into his face, but Naomi's subtle glance told her, "Not yet." Roy's grin widened. "Here's how this works. You two are gonna apologize for your little attitude, buy us a round of drinks, and maybe, if you ask real nice, we'll forget about this display of disrespect." Naomi set her drink down deliberately. Her voice was calm and steady, but carried through the hushed room. "Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to take your hands off my sister, step back from our table, and leave us alone. Because right now, you're making a very big mistake." Roy's eyes narrowed. "That sounded like a threat." "Sure did, Sarge," Shane piped in eagerly. "Threatening an officer." Brent's grip on Nadine's shoulders tightened, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. "Serious offense," he growled. "Might have to teach you girls some manners." The patrons watched silently, some staring at their drinks, others secretly raising phones under the table. A young man aimed his camera discreetly, but Roy spotted him with a sharp whistle. "Later," Roy muttered darkly. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "Apologize, or we take you downtown. Your choice," Nadine finally snapped. "Touch me again, and you'll pull back a stump." Shane only giggled, pulling out his handcuffs with a flourish. "Now that's a threat, clear as day." The room folds in on itself. The Harris sisters exchanged a silent look, an entire conversation passing between them in a heartbeat. Roy stood, towering over Naomi. "Get him up," he ordered. Brent shoved Nadine hard, forcing her arms behind her back. Shane cuffed her roughly, the steel biting deep into her skin. Naomi tried to rise, but Brent slammed her into the wall, his forearm pinning her chest. Disorderly conduct. Disturbing the peace. Threatening an officer, Roy recited with a smirk. "Yeah, that'll do." The sisters were forced toward the door, stumbling in their captor's grip. The bar parted like water, the crowd clearing a path. As the humid night air hit their faces, Nadine muttered through clenched teeth. "They have no idea who they're messing with." The men laughed as they dragged the sisters to the waiting patrol car. Javier Ortiz's phone light blinked faintly inside the bar from his apron pocket. He had been recording the entire time. And this night was far from over. The fluorescent lights in the booking area buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor across the scuffed linoleum floor. Naomi Harris and Nadine Harris were shoved forward by the drunken weight of their captors, chains from their handcuffs clinking like a cruel soundtrack. "Welcome to your new home," Sergeant Roy Mercer sneered, his whiskey-soaked breath hot against Naomi's neck. He jerked her forward with unnecessary force, making her stumble. Brent Harlow laughed behind them, while Shane Porter hummed tunelessly, spinning the cell keys around his finger. The desk sergeant barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. The night was still young, and already it reeked of corruption. "Ladies first," Shane mocked, swinging open the first cell door with a metallic groan. He shoved Nadine inside, slamming her shoulder into the concrete wall. Without bothering to remove the cuffs, he locked the door behind her. Naomi followed, thrown into the second cell with equal force. She hit the floor hard, then rose slowly, jaw tight. The cell doors clanged shut with a finality that rang through the empty booking area. "I want my phone call," Nadine demanded, her voice steady despite the fury burning behind her eyes. "It's our right." Roy leaned casually against the bars, smirking. "Rights? Not in my town. Not tonight!" "Illegal detention," Naomi shot back. "You're making this worse for yourselves." "Worse?" Shane chuckled. "Sweetheart, this is just the beginning." The sound of polished shoes clicking against the floor silenced them all. From the doorway emerged Chief Vernon Slade. Silver-haired, sharply dressed, and cold-eyed. He carried himself with a quiet authority more terrifying than the drunken bravado of his men. Well, he said softly, surveying the sisters as though they were specimens under glass. "Federal agents causing trouble in my house." Naomi stepped forward, gripping the bars. "Your officers assaulted us without cause, falsely arrested us, and now you're fabricating charges. We demand, you demand nothing." Slade cut her off, his tone pleasant, almost conversational, but more dangerous than any shout. He paced slowly between the cells, hands clasped behind his back. "You know, it's funny. Outsiders come here sometimes, waving their fancy titles around, thinking it means something, thinking they can investigate." He stopped in front of Nadine, his eyes narrowing. "Bad things tend to happen to people like that. Paperwork gets lost. People disappear." "You can't intimidate us," Nadine said, her voice low and sharp. "We've dealt with corrupt cops before." Slade's lips curled into a smile that never touched his eyes. "Corrupt? Such an ugly word. I prefer order. My order." He turned his gaze on Naomi. "You have a choice. Spend the night here, take your charges, and leave town tomorrow. Or," he let the alternative hang in the air like smoke. Naomi didn't blink. "Or what? You'll add us to your collection of victims?" "Victims?" Slade raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "All I see are two drunk women who attacked my officers. That's what the paperwork will show. That's what the judge will see. That's what the world will believe." He handed the forms back to Roy with a nod. "Finish processing them. By the book. Our book." The chief's footsteps faded as he disappeared into the corridor. The Harris sisters exchanged a look through the bars, their faces masks of controlled fury. "This isn't just about us," Naomi whispered. "Think how many others they've buried." The hours crawled by. The station grew quiet, broken only by the occasional shuffle of boots or the ring of a distant phone. At 2:13 a.m., the sisters were still awake, their bodies restless, their minds cataloging every word, every face, every detail. Footsteps returned. A young officer appeared, carrying 2 paper bags and cups of water. Officer Carla Reyes. The sisters had noticed her earlier, hanging back in the booking area, shoulders tense, eyes downcast. Now, she approached cautiously. "Dinner!" she announced loudly, sliding the bags through the slots. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't trust anyone here. This isn't the first time." Naomi's fingers brushed against hers as she accepted the bag. Something small and folded slipped into her palm. She kept her expression neutral as she tucked it away. Carla moved to Nadine's cell, sliding the second bag through. Her voice carried for anyone listening. "Standard issue sandwich and chips." Then, barely audible. "They do this every month, usually to women passing through. Black women." Nadine's face didn't change. "Thank you, officer," she said dully, sitting back on the bunk. But her eyes burned with understanding. When Carla left, Naomi unfolded the note beneath her blanket. A phone number, written in tight, neat script. Beneath it, emergency FBI contact. Deputy Director Victor Liang. "They've done this before," Nadine murmured, her voice so low it was almost breathless. "Multiple victims," Naomi corrected softly. "Multiple witnesses." She memorized the number, then destroyed the paper, chewing and swallowing the scraps like tasteless gum. They ate their stale sandwiches in silence. They needed strength. Through the high window, the moon watched like a cold eye. Hours later, drunk laughter echoed through the station. Roy, Brent, and Shane swaggered down the hall, bourbon in hand. They stopped at the sisters' cells, smirking at their supposed defeat. "How are our FBI superstars doing?" Roy mocked, tapping his baton against the bars. Naomi lowered her head, playing the part of the broken prisoner. Nadine curled up on her bunk, back turned. "Look at that," Shane sneered. "All that attitude gone." "Chief was right," Brent added. "They ain't so special after all." Their footsteps faded, the sound of a door slamming behind them. The sisters stayed in their positions until the silence stretched long enough to be safe. Then Nadine whispered across the bars, "They're getting sloppy." Naomi nodded. "Overconfident. Did you see the camera in the corner? The red light's off. Fake. They don't want evidence of what happens in here." Naomi leaned closer, her voice tight. "But that works both ways." The sisters could still hear the men's drunken laughter through the thin concrete walls. Each word carried another confession, another detail of the system they thought they controlled. Naomi shifted subtly, angling her body just enough for the hidden microphone sewn into her bra strap to capture every poisonous word. And so, while the Harris sisters appeared broken to their captors, in truth, they were recording every story, every crime, every brag about destroyed lives, evidence, ammunition. Their time would come. The night stretched on like a bad dream. The station smelled of sweat, old coffee, and stale power. From their cells, Naomi and Nadine Harris listened to the drunken boasts of their captors. Every word recorded by Naomi's hidden mic at 4 a.m. Samadren Tuaimidrf. Two. The men's voices grew louder, looser. "Remember the Williams family?" Shane Porter slurred. "3 generations in that house, until we got creative with that seizure. Now it's a coffee shop," Brent Harlow chuckled. "Development company was real grateful." Roy Mercer laughed darkly. "And that envelope the chief got? Not exactly thin." The sisters lay motionless on their bunks, pretending to sleep. But inside, fury burned hotter with every confession. These weren't just corrupt cops. They were predators, architects of destruction, hiding behind badges. Hours later, a familiar face appeared as dawn painted pale light across the concrete. Officer Carla Reyes slipped quietly into the corridor, breakfast trays balanced in her hands. Her eyes darted down the hall before she whispered, "Eat quickly. I can get you to a phone. 5 minutes during shift change. There's a blind spot behind the filing cabinets in records. Make them count." Naomi studied her face, trembling hands, but steady eyes, fear mixed with resolve. She wasn't setting a trap, she was taking a risk. "Why help us?" Nadine asked softly. Carla's jaw clenched. "Because I've seen what they do, and I'm done being part of it." When the moment came, the plan was seamless. A spilt pot of coffee at the front desk created chaos, just as Carla had promised. Keys jingled in the lock. "Now!" she hissed, ushering them down the back corridor. The file room smelled of dust and forgotten paper. Carla pointed to the old landline tucked behind a cabinet, then stationed herself at the door. 5 minutes. Naomi's hands shook as she dialed the number committed to memory. Deputy Director Victor Liang. The line rang 3 times before a calm, clipped voice answered. "This is Liang. Sir, it's Agent Naomi Harris. We're being held in a local station. We have evidence of massive corruption. Multiple officers, including their chief. It's all on tape." There was a pause, heavy with weight. "Naomi, stay calm. I'll get you out." Relief surged through her chest, until Liang's voice hardened. "But be careful. Someone higher up has already tried to bury this. Don't trust anyone outside my office." Before Naomi could respond, Carla whispered urgently, "Someone's coming." They were rushed back into their cells just as heavy footsteps filled the hall. The sisters slumped against the bars, faces blank, disguising the hope burning inside them. That afternoon, a visitor arrived. She wore a pressed blazer, sharp glasses, and carried a recorder with the precision of someone who had done this dance before. Tasha Monroe, investigative journalist. The guards sneered as she entered the interview room. "Another bleeding heart reporter," Brent muttered. "Enjoy your pity piece." Tasha set her recorder down, her eyes sharp as she leaned close. "Javier Ortiz contacted me. He's got footage, everything from that night at the bar. But there's more. Judge Harold Benton's been collecting files for years. Corruption, planted evidence, false arrests. He's waiting for you." Naomi's eyes flicked toward the guard outside. "How?" she mouthed silently. Tasha pretended to jot notes, her pen scratching. On the pad she wrote, "Meeting tonight. Benton's house. Javier is bringing footage, including files, bank records, and badge numbers. Proof." The sisters exchanged a glance. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a war. That evening, during shift change, Carla struck again. The cameras in the cell block malfunctioned. Within minutes, Naomi and Nadine were crouched low under a blanket in Tasha's car, slipping past the security checkpoint. The guard barely looked at her press pass. Judge Harold Benton's house was modest, but fortified by years of wisdom. He opened the door, tall and dignified, his kind eyes shadowed by decades of injustice witnessed from the bench. "Welcome," Benton said gravely. "We have much to discuss." Inside, Javier Ortiz was already waiting, his laptop glowing on the dining table. His face was drawn, but his voice steady. "I have everything," he said. "Not just that night. Years of recordings. Them bragging, laughing, confessing crimes they thought no one heard." Benton nodded, spreading out thick folders across the table. "And I have the court records, case after case where evidence appeared out of thin air, witnesses who recanted after conversations, arrests timed to silence complaints." Tasha joined them, adding her stack, bank transfers, offshore accounts, suspicious property deals. "It's not just local corruption. It's systemic, state level, money laundering, land grabs, political cover." Nadine scanned the files, her sharp memory cataloging every date, every name. "It's organized," she said coldly. "A machine." "Machines can be broken," Tasha countered. Javier leaned forward. "And we've got witnesses, people ready to talk, now that they know they're not alone." The judge's expression softened. "In all my years on the bench, I've never seen a case this strong, or people this determined." The hours passed in a flurry of evidence, cross-references, and whispered strategy. Papers covered every inch of the table. Laptops hummed, pens scratched, phone lines buzzed with cautious messages. Naomi stood at the window by dawn, watching light creep across the horizon. Her voice was quiet but steady. "We're not fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for everyone they've silenced." The others lifted their heads. In her words, they saw their own fire reflected. An unshakable belief that justice, though delayed, was still possible. But outside, in the dark edges of the city, others were listening too, and they weren't about to give up power without a fight. The stacks of files, the footage, the whispered promises of justice felt fragile, like a house of cards ready to topple. Naomi and Nadine Harris knew they had enough to start a war, but also knew every move from here had to be perfect. That afternoon, during a carefully orchestrated distraction, Officer Carla Reyes unlocked the cell doors just long enough to let Naomi use the old landline again. This time, she dialed the direct number of their FBI supervisor, Alan Price. The line clicked. "This is Price." "Sir, it's Agent Naomi Harris," she whispered urgently. "We've uncovered massive corruption. Chief Vernon Slade, his men, even local judges. We have footage, confessions, everything." There was silence. Then Price's tone shifted, colder than ice. I've already heard from Chief Slade. He says you assaulted his officers, caused chaos in his town. Now you're making wild accusations? That's a lie, Nadine hissed, leaning close to the receiver. We have proof. Hours of recordings. Listen carefully. Price cut her off. His voice oiled through the line. Whatever you think you have, forget it. Drop this now while you still can. That's an order, Agent Harris. The dial tone buzzed in Naomi's ear as he hung up. For a moment, neither sister moved. The betrayal sank in heavy, sharp. They had trusted him, believed the Bureau would protect its own. Instead, Price had chosen the other side. Back in their cells, Roy Mercer strutted down the corridor, waving a phone. His grin was cruel, victorious. Well, well, he drawled. Just got off the line with your boss. Seems he thinks you're problem agents, always causing trouble. Said we should handle you, locally. Nadine slammed her fists against the bars, the sound echoing like a bell of rage. You corrupt piece of... Careful, Roy cut her off, wagging a finger. Your boss gave us plenty of time. Said make sure the lesson sticks. Naomi's fury crystallized into something colder, sharper. No shouting, no threats, just 4 words spoken with deadly calm. Then we burn it all. Roy's smirk faltered, if only for a second. That night, when the station was quiet, keys rattled again. Roy, Brent, and Shane appeared outside the cells, their faces twisted with cruel anticipation. Rise and shine, FBI, Roy sneered, unlocking the doors. Time for a field trip. Dragged barefoot through empty corridors, the sisters were shoved into the back of a white van. No windows, no seats, just the smell of oil and rust. Brent climbed in with them while Roy drove and Shane rode shotgun. The van rumbled down back roads, branches scraping its sides. You know what your problem is? Roy called from the front. You thought that shiny badge made you untouchable. Thought you could waltz into my town and start digging. Your town, Naomi shot back. You mean your playground, where you terrorize whoever you want? Brent's backhand cracked across her face. Shut your mouth. Touch her again, Nadine growled, her voice low and dangerous. And you'll regret it. They laughed, but unease flickered beneath their bravado. 20 minutes later, the van screeched to a stop in front of an abandoned warehouse. Moonlight spilt through broken windows, casting jagged shadows across the crumbling walls. Home, sweet home, Roy mocked. At least until the gators clean up what's left of you. Inside, the warehouse was a graveyard of rusted machinery and oil drums. Rats scurried in the corners as the men shoved the sisters to the floor. You know what I love about this job? Roy circled them like a predator, putting arrogant scum in their place. Especially women who think having dark skin and a badge makes them special. Naomi's lip curled. This isn't about respect. This is about you not being able to stand women you can't control. Roy yanked her hair back, pressing his gun to her temple. His voice dropped to a growl. Any last words, Agent Harris? Naomi stared him down, unblinking. Yeah, you're weak. That's why you need a gun. Roy's hand trembled with fury. Behind him, Nadine worked silently, fingers twisting the small hairpin she'd slipped from her braids. The cufflock clicked open. In the same heartbeat that Roy swung his weapon to strike Naomi, Nadine exploded upward, driving her elbow into Brent's ribs. He doubled over with a grunt of pain. Naomi ducked, the gun whistling past her ear. Her leg swept out, catching Shane's ankle. He crashed to the floor, his baton clattering away. Roy roared, swinging wildly. Nadine caught his wrist, twisting sharply until the gun flew into the darkness. Naomi followed with a clean right hook to his jaw. Brent recovered, charging, but the sisters moved in perfect sync. Nadine flipped him over her hip, slamming him onto the concrete. Naomi's knee drove into Shane's chest as he scrambled up, knocking the air from his lungs. Years of FBI training turned into a deadly ballet. Dodges, strikes, precision counters, 2 against 3, but the balance shifted fast. Finally, Nadine snapped Roy's own handcuffs around his wrists, yanking them tight. He collapsed to his knees, dazed and bleeding. "Welcome to our world," she hissed. Naomi pulled a small device from her boot, a modified body cam, blinking red. She set it on a crate, aiming it squarely at the men. "What's that?" Shane croaked, clutching his side. "Your confession booth," Naomi said coldly. "Everything you say is streaming live. FBI servers, news outlets, the internet." Roy's bloodshot eyes widened. "You're bluffing." Naomi held up her phone, the live feed already broadcasting. "Thousands are watching, including your bosses." The men froze. Then Roy, drunk and desperate, sneered into the lens. "You think that badge makes you special? This is how it's always been. Keeping people in their place. Plant a little evidence. Rough 'em up. They learn quick who's in charge." Shane tried to shut him up, but Roy was too far gone. His rants spilt out, about quotas, targeting neighborhoods, bribing judges, and even FBI ties. Across town, Officer Carla Reyes sat at her desk, streaming the feed to every platform she could reach. Local news, national outlets, hashtags trended within minutes. The warehouse doors burst open. FBI tactical teams stormed in, weapons raised. Behind them, state police flooded the room. "You're under arrest," an agent barked, hauling Roy to his feet. "You can't do this," Roy screamed, thrashing against the cuffs. "I'm a cop." "Not anymore," Nadine said coldly. Naomi kept the camera steady, ensuring every second of his breakdown was captured. Across the internet, millions were watching the downfall of men who had thought themselves untouchable. The predator had become the prey. Morning light spilt across the courthouse steps as reporters swarmed like bees. Microphones, cameras, flashing bulbs, all pointed toward two women walking side by side, their heads high, their resolve unshaken. Naomi and Nadine Harris had been dragged through the mud, locked in cells, and nearly silenced forever. Yet here they stood, no longer as victims, but as victors. Behind them, officers escorted the disgraced figures of Roy Mercer, Brent Harlow, and Shane Porter into waiting vans. Their once proud uniforms were now symbols of shame, their faces plastered across every news outlet in the country. Chief Vernon Slade had been indicted within hours, his empire of fear collapsing like a house of cards. The sisters stopped at the podium. Naomi leaned forward, her voice carrying steadily over the crowd. "This was never just about us. This was about every voice silenced, every victim ignored, every life destroyed by corruption hidden behind a badge. Today, the world saw the truth, and tomorrow, we keep fighting." Nadine placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, her gaze sweeping the flashing lights. "Justice isn't easy. It's not fast. But it's worth it. And we're not done." The applause was deafening. Somewhere in the crowd, Officer Carla Reyes stood quietly, her eyes glistening. Javier Ortiz lifted his camera, capturing the moment that would define history. Judge Benton watched with pride, and Tasha Monroe scribbled furiously, already shaping tomorrow's headline. For the first time in years, the city felt lighter. Not healed, but healing. The Harris sisters stepped down from the podium, walking forward into a future where their fight was far from over, but where they would never walk alone. Drop a comment below if you believe in justice over corruption. And don't forget to subscribe. 13 Android on iPowers, because more true stories like this are on the way.